Hamlet is a tragedy written by William Shakespeare. The play's story, which can be traced back to a 12th century Latin text, is about a Danish prince named Hamlet, who seeks to avenge his father's murder at the hands of his uncle, Claudius. The play is not only Shakespeare's longest, but also one of his most iconic. At the start of the play, the King of Denmark has died, and his brother Claudius has assumed the throne and married his late brother's wife, Queen Gertrude. Consumed with grief over his father's sudden death, Prince Hamlet is appalled by his mother's marriage to Claudius, whose character is, he believes, inferior to that of his deceased father. Little does Hamlet know, the ghost of his dead father appeared to his skeptical friend Horatio and 2 castle sentries the previous night. When Horatio tells Hamlet of this sighting, Hamlet decides to watch for the ghost himself that evening. Soon, the ghost appears. Addressing only Hamlet, the ghost says he's come from purgatory to demand vengeance against his brother Claudius, who murdered him by pouring poison into his ear. Hamlet is shocked and vows to avenge his father's murder by killing Claudius. Meanwhile, Claudius's chief advisor Polonius is concerned about his daughter Ophelia, who loves Hamlet but is confused by his gloomy mood lately. At first, Polonius orders his daughter to stay away from Hamlet, but he later becomes convinced that Ophelia's lack of affection is the reason for Hamlet's melancholy. Polonius decides to observe the couple together in secret, hiding behind a tapestry with Claudius. But when Ophelia tries to flirt with Hamlet, his mind is on his father's murder, and he rebukes her advances, proving Polonius wrong. Next, Claudius recruits Hamlet's school friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, to discover the reason for Hamlet's foul mood. But Hamlet quickly realizes that his friends are working against him as spies. Dodging his questions, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern tell Hamlet that they ran into a troupe of actors on their way to the castle and invited them along to perform for the court. Hamlet decides to have these actors perform a play based on the murder of his father to see how Claudius reacts. If he seems rattled by the performance, it will prove his guilt. Meanwhile, Claudius learns that Fortinbras, the prince of enemy Norway, has expressed interest in waging war on Denmark, owing to the recent change in the country's leadership. Claudius is reassured, however, when he learns that Norway's king has forbade Fortinbras from invading Denmark, and that the Norwegian army intends to invade a small area in Poland instead. To do so, they need Claudius's permission to march through Denmark, which he grants. That evening, Claudius indeed seems disturbed by the performance of Hamlet's play and even storms out, convincing Hamlet of his guilt. Hamlet decides to tell his mother, but on his way to her chamber, Hamlet overhears Claudius confessing his sins, including the murder, to God. Hamlet nearly kills Claudius, but stops short, realizing that if he killed his uncle while he was praying, Claudius would go straight to heaven. Hamlet goes to Gertrude's chamber and tries to convince his mother of Claudius's evil character. Meanwhile, Polonius is once again spying on their conversation from behind a curtain. At one point, Gertrude misinterprets Hamlet's words, thinking he intends to kill her. She screams out for help, causing Polonius to scream as well. Assuming it's Claudius behind the curtain, Hamlet stabs at the fabric, killing Polonius. Following Polonius's death, Hamlet's friends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern escort Hamlet on a diplomatic mission to England at the request of Claudius. However, Hamlet is unaware that Claudius gave them a letter for the English king, instructing him to have Hamlet killed upon his arrival. Soon, Hamlet discovers this letter in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's possession, and secretly replaces it with one asking that his friends be killed instead of him. Meanwhile, Polonius' son, Laertes, upset over his father's murder, confronts Claudius and threatens to seize the throne from him with the help of an angry mob. Claudius assures him that Hamlet is responsible, and together they decide to arrange for a casual duel between Hamlet and Laertes, who is a skilled swordsman. Secretly, they plan to line Laertes' sword with poison, ensuring that even a small wound will kill Hamlet. As an added precaution, Claudius will prepare a cup of poison to give to Hamlet during the fight. Returning home from his journey, Hamlet passes through a cemetery, encountering a gravedigger in the midst of preparing a new grave. Engaging in wordplay with the man, Hamlet irreverently picks up the skull of Yorick, a court jester he knew as a child, and muses about the nature of mortality. Soon, a funeral procession arrives, and Laertes informs Hamlet that the newly dug grave is for Ophelia, who, driven mad by Hamlet's rejection, drowned herself. Laertes leaps upon Ophelia's grave to hold her body once more, and Hamlet dives in after him, nearly coming to blows with Laertes. Hamlet assures him that he loved Ophelia 40 times as much as a brother could, then flees the cemetery. Back at court, Hamlet learns of Laertes' intention to challenge him to a duel. Horatio worries that Laertes is a better swordsman, but Hamlet assures him he has been practicing and agrees to the fight. At first, Hamlet is doing so well that Gertrude toasts to him with a poisoned cup, drinking it before Claudius can stop her. Laertes, seeing that his and Claudius's plan will soon become clear, slashes Hamlet with the poisoned sword. But as the men scuffle, their swords are switched around, and Hamlet wounds Laertes with the poisoned sword as well. As they both die, Laertes tells Hamlet of Claudius's plan, and Hamlet stabs his uncle, killing him. With Hamlet, Claudius, Gertrude, and Laertes all dead, the path is cleared for Fortinbras, passing through on his way to Poland to claim the throne. Like many of his other plays, the idea for Hamlet can be traced to a range of earlier literary sources, as far back as a Norse legend composed in 1200 AD, as well as historical sources about Denmark. While there is no evidence to suggest that Shakespeare ever visited Denmark, Hamlet's castle, Elsinore, is a real castle called Kronborg, located in Helsinge, in Denmark. Can you hear the similarities in the name? In the original version of the story, the plot outlines how an ambitious and devious man killed his brother to become king, then married the widowed queen. The prince pretends to be mad while he plans his revenge and successfully manages to kill his treacherous uncle. Sure, it's pretty similar to Shakespeare's version, but there are some significant differences that we can identify which reflect the unique concerns of Shakespeare's context. For a start, there is a lot more going on philosophically in Shakespeare's play. His focus on deep and difficult philosophical questions about morality and mortality reflects the concerns of a time period called the Renaissance. This was a cultural movement that began around the 15th century in Italy and moved throughout Europe. It was popular among scholars and the nobility. The Renaissance focused on the revival of classical Greek and Latin texts that had previously been lost. A key idea in these texts was the importance of humanism. Humanism is a school of thought that says that the unique virtues that make us human should be studied and celebrated. Renaissance thinkers explored human experience because they thought that humanity's capacity for understanding and reason is amazing. In fact, Hamlet's iconic line in Act 2, Scene 2, "What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason! How infinite in faculty!" However, when Hamlet speaks to the ghost in Act 1, Scene 5, he is told that it really is the spirit of his late father who has been trapped in purgatory. According to Catholic theology, purgatory was a place that the souls of the dead were sent to temporarily suffer for the minor sins they committed in their lifetime. Once this suffering was complete, the souls could pass to heaven. There is some evidence that Hamlet subscribes to Protestantism, seeing as he has been studying in Wittenberg, a city made famous by a Protestant theologian called Luther, who criticized the Catholic faith and was instrumental in spreading Protestantism throughout Europe. However, the appearance of Catholic theology at key moments in the play brings back that trademark uncertainty to the question of religion. About one of the only religious aspects of the play that wasn't super ambiguous was the importance of the great chain of being. This was a way of explaining the way power operated in the Elizabethan era. The great chain of being was a hierarchy that saw society organized with God reigning supreme at the top of the chain. He was followed by the king or queen, who was chosen by God as his representative on earth. This was followed by the nobles and aristocrats, all the way down to the peasants who were relatively powerless at the bottom of the chain. The most important point about this way of viewing the world is that God ordains where each person falls on the chain, and this must be maintained, or else the world will fall into chaos. This is clear in Hamlet, as the murder of old King Hamlet sets Denmark spinning off into a chaotic darkness that continues until the injustice is set right. Finally, it is worth remembering that there were key differences between the way men and women were expected to behave in Shakespeare's context, and these expectations affect the way the characters in the play behave. The society of Elizabethan England was a patriarchal one, which means that men had all the power. Men were expected to behave in typically masculine ways, ordering their women about, occupying positions of power, and generally being strong and brave. Hamlet is often criticized by Claudius as acting in unmanly ways when he shows too much emotion. Similarly, It is the moments when he thinks too much about his actions rather than being masculine and assertive that things start to go awry. On the other hand, women were expected to be submissive and obedient, seen and not heard. They were basically possessions and were controlled by the men in their lives. Look at the way Ophelia is bossed around by her brother and father in Act 1, and the way that she becomes little more than a pawn in Claudius and Polonius's shady dealings in Act 3. Furthermore, women were only valuable if they could bring wealth and power to their family through making a good marriage, and to do this, they needed to protect their chastity. This means that they were expected to remain virgins until they were married. This is why such a big deal is made over protecting Ophelia's virtue against the sexual advances of Hamlet early in the play. Her madness and eventual death is a direct result of the way she is manipulated and exploited by the men in her life. Men who should have been protecting her, and reminds us of the powerlessness of women in Shakespeare's time.